I genuinely wish for this series to be the most fruitful one we've ever had. And when I say productive, I mean that I want everyone here to have a clear and noble will achieve it. I want you all to achieve your goals before we conclude in May. Let me assure you, you can make it happen. I'm saying this with complete seriousness. What do I mean? By our genuine beliefs. Our true beliefs are the principles we live by. Essentially, real belief and knowing are intertwined. When a person genuinely believes something, it's almost as if they know it. Belief is like a bridge to knowing. It's a step closer. So, when I talk about belief, I refer to faith. I call it belief. However, belief is not truly complete until it transforms into an actual experience. You have to live it, experience it, and only then can you say you truly know it. Now, everyone present tonight will hear the same message. But the interesting thing is that no two people will absorb it at the same level. Some may hear it superficially. Others will grasp it a bit deeper, and a few will truly resonate with it, absorbing it into the very core of their being. It all depends on where you are when you hear it. As we've been told, the word reached them just as it has reached her. However, it didn't benefit them because they didn't combine it with faith when they heard it. They heard it, but it didn't resonate with them. It entered their ears and left, unaccepted. They didn't embrace it with open hearts, and so they promptly dismissed it. Tonight, my hope is that you won't reject what I'm sharing with you, but that's entirely up to you. You have the freedom to choose whether to accept or reject it. But let me emphasize this. I can speak all night, but if you don't put it into practice, if you don't become the driving force behind it, it won't work by itself. You are the one who must make it work. Right now, I'd like you to think about a friend. Imagine thinking of a friend, and while you're at it, imagine hearing something wonderful about them, or perhaps about a mutual friend, or even about yourselves. Just hear it in your mind. Now, you might say, well, I imagined it, but it didn't actually happen. But here's the thing. A day will come when, as you imagine a state, even before you have external proof of it, it will feel as real to you heard it from an external source. You will know it deep within. This internal act will be just as valid as an external confirmation of that act. You see, the difference between God and humans ultimately boils down to this imaginative power. When we talk about God's power, as the scriptures often do, it's described as sheer, constant power. Moses, as we know from the scriptures, stood in the presence of a creative power, an immense creative power, and the gap between God and us is essentially measured by the extent of this power on different levels. When I'm operating at the surface level of my being, only what my senses perceive feels real, but as I deeper into my own being, getting closer to the core of my existence, where God resides, my imagined actions start to materialize more rapidly. They manifest externally as I journey deeper into my inner selves. On the surface, it might seem like there's a time gap between my imaginative act and its externalization. But here's the catch. If I believe and have faith, it starts to manifest. However, if I don't believe or have doubts, it may never take an external form. Not once has it ever materialized in my external world when I didn't believe. I've lived in a world, much like many of us, without truly understanding it, not comprehending the underlying mechanisms at play. I want to share a vital message with you, and it's a plea to consider buying your religion wholesale directly from the source. You see, there's no need for intermediaries or middlemen. It's a direct connection between you and the Creator. Don't settle for a retail version with a label in between. Go straight to the maker, to the origin. And where is this source? It's within you. It's your own incredible human imagination, your I amness. That, my friends, is God. Let me share with you a story from last Tuesday. It's about a man named Eddie who had an experience remarkably similar to the one described in the book of Exodus. In that biblical account, when Moses heard the words, "Do not come here," it filled him with awe. Those words are found in the 4th, 5th, and 6th verses of the 3rd chapter of Exodus. So, the Lord said to Moses, "Do not come here." And Moses responded by hiding his face, not out of shame, mind you, but out of sheer fear. He was truly afraid to gaze upon God. And he saw the symbol of God and took off running, scared out of his wits, just like in the identical story. What did he hear? The revelation of God's name. I am. He heard it for the first time. I am. No one was in sight. Then it echoed so loudly that he thought it must be coming from above. He looked up, wondering if it might be some kind of machine. Maybe a helicopter with a pay system broadcasting the name I am, but there was nothing to be seen. And then came the 3rd message. "Don't come up here." Despite his curiosity, he couldn't resist climbing the hill to confront a rattlesnake. It wasn't just any snake. It was a 4-foot-long serpent, fully stretched out, embodying the symbol of God's creative power. However, it frightened him. It becomes evident to a person when they truly look within themselves that they are solely responsible for everything happening in their world, entirely responsible. It becomes clear to some. It's almost overwhelming until they delve deeper and hear the same truth resounding at a profound level. Then, they take on full responsibility for all that is transpiring within them. Tonight, allow me to share a few stories with you. 7 years ago, there was a lady who, unfortunately, isn't with us tonight. She has embarked on a new journey and is temporarily away. However, when she learned that our thoughts can shape our reality, she had a profound idea. She thought to herself, what if this is true? What if imagining can truly create my reality? I'd love to visit Egypt. The challenge was she had no financial means for such an undertaking. She had always been someone who worked hard for modest earnings, never able to save up enough for a trip like that. It's a familiar story, isn't it? But she didn't keep this dream to herself. She shared it with others. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, if you genuinely believe in something, sharing it is encouraged. As we're advised in Scripture, go tell no man, but show John, show the world. However, if you don't share it with others beforehand, will they believe you when it comes to pass? They might question your sincerity. But if you share your vision before it materializes, you provide assurance because you've already told them about it beforehand. As the Scripture says, now I'm telling you before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. However, this kind of courage resides deep within oneself, where one understands that the imaginal act has an immediate impact at the very moment it is conceived, even if it hasn't yet manifested in the external world. But not everyone possesses that level of courage and faith in the power of imagination. So she shared her vision. A well-meaning friend expressed skepticism, saying, going for something like that is foolish. You're throwing away your money. It's not grounded in religion. What is it really? He's just feeding you false hopes. Wishful thinking won't transform into reality to them. It seemed absurd, incomprehensible in their eyes. A valid judgment must align with external facts. For instance, if I were to say, isn't this a beautiful dog? But there is no dog present to confirm my judgment, then my assessment would be considered incorrect. That's the perspective they drew from her words, which seemed to echo my teachings. Consequently, they concluded that the whole concept was irrational and senseless. Years passed, and several years have gone by. Now, let me share what transpired just this past week. She secured a job as a nurse, a role that frequently took her to different locations based on where the need arose. One day, she found herself in the vicinity of a friend she hadn't seen or spoken to in over a year. During that time, they had exchanged pleasantries in the form of a birthday card and a Christmas greeting accompanied by a brief note. but they hadn't had a phone conversation or any other form of contact. Being in the neighborhood, she decided to give her friend a call. When her voice quivered with anticipation, she uttered, "Oh, Jan, you can have it. You can have it." In response, Jan replied, all right, I'll take it. What is it? And so this is where the story truly begins. So there's this pre-Lenten bash happening at the Hotel Fleur des for Mardi Gras, hosted by the Joseph and Mary Society, a Catholic group. They've got top prizes, you know. The grand prize, a 30-day trip top-notch, all expenses covered, even stopping at swanky Hilton hotels up in the Northeast. And believe it or not, Egypt's on the itinerary. Now, this lady and her family had already done some serious globe trotting last year, so they weren't too keen on going abroad again this time around. In fact, they'd already locked in their plans to hit up the World's Fair in New York City, opening in April. So, an overseas trip was out of the question. Plus, this ticket only covered one person, not a whole family. Her pal said, "You might as well give it a pass." But then Jen piped up and said, "You know what? I'll take it." She called me up and told me the whole story. A tale that seemed to be on hold for 7 long years. She's still got that ticket, though. And if she ever decides to use it, she's got herself a first-class journey to the Northeast, Egypt included, with everything covered. You see, she believed. Maybe along the way, her faith wavered a bit. Perhaps she even tried to justify it by saying, "Maybe I don't really want it," but somehow, in its own sweet time, it resurfaced. I urge you not to discard your dreams and believe that they are unattainable in this peculiar, mundane world dominated by external realities. Every dream has the potential to become a reality. If I can convey to you that your imagination is a divine force, and that when you engage in an imaginal act, such as envisioning a friend in conversation, it is the manifestation of Jesus Christ in action, take a moment to introspect and determine if you are holding on to your faith. Challenge yourself. Don't you recognize that Jesus Christ resides within you? If he dwells within you, then who is he? He is your very own imagination. Your imagination is God, and when it's in motion, that's God in action. God's active form is imagination, and the manifestation of God in action is Christ. As outlined in Scripture, Christ embodies the power and wisdom of God. Therefore, I say to you, true belief in Jesus Christ is within everyone's reach. There may be 1 billion people who claim to believe in Jesus Christ, yet they genuflect before lifeless objects made of wood, marble, clay, or something other than a living God. Consider, for instance, the recent passing of the King of Greece, who was brought what was deemed a sacred icon upon his death. In the eyes of God, a king is no different from any other person. They are all equal, and love for one is not greater than doubt for another. To what extent have these individuals truly grasped the word of God and embraced genuine faith? So as he lay there, on the brink of death, surrounded by a holy icon, it didn't bring the desired result. He merely gazed upon the small icon before making his exit, departing this world just like any other ordinary soul. I hope that each and every one of you gathered here will come to discover the true essence of Jesus Christ. The authentic Jesus Christ resides within your own marvelous human imagination. That's God in motion. The genuine God is none other than your own splendid and beautiful imagination. When you declare, "I am," you are invoking God's presence. Now allow me to divulge something that was imparted to me just this past week by a gentleman who is present among us tonight. He has penned some magnificent tales, and I sincerely hope he continues to do so, because they are truly captivating. I've already shared these stories with those who visited my home since receiving his letter, but I want to share them with all of you tonight. He is a writer, primarily working for television. 3 years ago, he embarked on a journey with a show that has been on the air for the same duration. and he has been responsible for crafting every third or fourth script he shared. When I first started, I was getting $2,500 per script within 2 years. My agent negotiated up to $3,000 per script. Then, just a year ago, around Christmas, my mother traveled from the East to visit us here in the West. I proudly told her about the $3,000 per script I was earning. However, her response was unexpected. She nonchalantly remarked, "Well, I always thought you were making $3,500 per script." She wasn't the least bit impressed with $3,000. He tried to explain to her that, to his knowledge, there wasn't a solo writer in the field who earned more than he did, at $3,000 per script. But her opinion remained unchanged. In her eyes, it was worth $3,500 per script. 2 months later, the agent received a call from the studio regarding the renewal of the contract for the next year writing. Before meeting with the studio executives, the agent knew he needed to consult with the writer. He expressed his opinion to the writer, suggesting that they shouldn't seek a higher rate. After all, they had already negotiated an increase from $2,500 to $3,000 per script, and it wouldn't be wise to overprice themselves and risk losing the opportunity. The writer concurred with the agent's perspectives. Their relationship with the producer was amicable, so why jeopardize it by asking for more than what had already been agreed upon? And so they reached a mutual understanding the very next day following their agreement. A conference was convened to discuss story matters, an important story conference. During the meeting, the producer turned to the writer and asked, "Have you finalized the contract for the next year?" The writer replied, "Yes, I'm planning to sign it." The producer inquired further, "Did you request a higher fee?" The writer responded, "No, I didn't." The producer insisted, "Well, you should ask for more." The writer was puzzled and said, "But you've often mentioned that the budget isn't sufficient." The producer acknowledged, "Yes, I've voiced my concerns about the budget. I'm telling you to ask for more. So please ask for more money again." The writer hesitated, expressing, "I'm concerned about pricing myself out of the business." To which the producer replied firmly, "Tell your agent to request more." Upon returning, the writer promptly contacted his agent and instructed him to request a higher fee. However, the agent initially thought that perhaps the writer had indulged in one too many cocktails during lunch. He responded, "No, I'll provide you with the source," and proceeded to recount events of that very day at the conference, with this newfound information that the producer had actually recommended a raise. The agent made a bold move and contacted the business office at the studio to ask for more money. The reaction was nothing short of explosive. They shouted in disbelief. And then, quite surprisingly, they decided to overlook the request as if it had never been made. This was done to ensure that the harmonious relationship between the producer and the writer, which had endured for the past 3 years, would remain intact. However, the agent, knowing the source of the requests, stood firm when he emerged from that office. He had secured a contract for $3,500 per script. As the writer and his daughter shared with me, it was simply their mother's assumption that he was already earning $3,500 per script. And this assumption, unbeknownst to all of us, including the producers, bore unexpected fruit. Then he continued, "I decided to give her a call and inform her about my current script earnings. Upon hearing the figure, she became genuinely intrigued and started to delve into your books more seriously." He went on to mention a long-standing and deeply troubling issue that had burdened them for 25 years, promising to reveal it at a later time. But he couldn't help but share a remarkable transformation, saying, "I must tell you, last Friday, that issue, which had been a heavy burden for so long, was completely swept out of her life. It's time for us to make a confession." He then reflected on his initial encounters with the teachings, admitting, "When I first heard you, I couldn't comprehend your words. And soon after, I even began to fear that I might be losing my sanity because I started to understand you, with a hint of mystery," he concluded. "I'll explain that part to you later. I'm eagerly awaiting that explanation as well. But it reminds me of a passage from the book of John, which can be found in the 10th chapter, 20th verse. In that chapter, Jesus declares, 'He has a devil. He is mad. Why listen to him?' It's interesting to note that in the preceding chapter, he boldly states, 'I know my Father. My Father is he whom you call God. But I know my Father, and ye know not your God.' For this assertion, they stoned him. They began by stoning him with the literal facts of life. Those stones of Scripture. When you confront a person who dares to affirm what reason denies is what the senses deny. Those who refuse to accept his truth then throw the stones, or the facts of life, at him to challenge the reality of his claim, which are founded on the power of imagination. So, he had just boldly declared, 'I and my Father are one, and my Father is he whom you call God. But I know my Father, and you know not your God.' And it's a story that resonates deeply, for he confessed, 'I couldn't comprehend your teachings initially, and then I started to fear that I might be descending into a form of madness, because I began to understand you. This journey leads you into an entirely different realms, where surface-level reasoning often struggles to prevail over the profound belief in the inner reality you're creating. The key,' he emphasized, is to share your aspirations and beliefs with others before they come to fruition. If you keep them to yourself and only reveal them afterward, people may question your integrity. However, if you confide in them beforehand and possess enough faith, you can confidently go about your business. But if your faith falters, they will pester you and continually inquire, 'What happened to that certain home, that specific job, that designated sum of money you said you were going to manifest? Where is it?' They persistently inquire, casting stones or the facts of life at you. Now let me share something with you, and I urge you to listen carefully. It's a rather lengthy letter, and the writer is bringing forth certain points that you may have overlooked. You see, what we are striving to do here is to uncover all the intricate facets of the world's greatest secret. The secret of imagination. As Fawcett aptly put it, the secret of imagining is the greatest of all problems, to the solution of which all should aspire. For supreme power, supreme wisdom, and supreme delight lie in the solution of this far-off problem, this great mystery. And in this letter, he shed some light on it, as best as I can recollect. It was a rather extensive typewritten letter spanning 4 pages, but let me distill some of its key points for you. When I first encountered my producer 3 years ago, he presented himself as an exceedingly composed and restrained individual. Reserves would indeed be the apt term to describe him. Very reserved. It's important to note that he was a far cry from the exuberant enthusiasm I had previously encountered in my professional associations. He was remarkably reserved, to the point that he had difficulty expressing anything in superlative. In fact, the most effusive praise he could muster was the simple word, good. When I submitted my scripts, his highest accolade was, without fail, good. I made up my mind to change this situation. So I lay down on my bed, and I distinctly heard him saying to me, "Great, just great." Now, the curious thing was, I hadn't even begun working on the script at that point. I had merely handed him a script, and he had, in his usual manner, deemed it good. Now I was in the process of working on the next script, replaying it over and over in my mind, when suddenly, I distinctly heard him utter angrily, "Great, just great." This took me by surprise because, at that point, I hadn't even started the new script. While I was still pondering this, my phone rang. It was the producer on the other end, and he was telling me that the script he had previously labeled as nudes, good, had now transformed into great, just great. It caught me off guard because I was expecting this praise to be directed at the new script. which I hadn't even begun working on. Not only did he throw me this unexpected curve, but it seemed like there had been some sort of crossed wires. So right then and there, I continued crafting a new, let's call it, fabrication for him to employ. I decided to shift it from great, just great, to terrific. So the only word I had heard was terrific. I diligently worked on this new script and submitted it. And to my amazement, that's precisely the word he used when he said to me, "It's terrific," which his enthusiasm perfectly matched my own imagining. At this point, I couldn't help but think to myself, 2 months later, every script I presented during that time received either a great, just great, or terrific as feedback. There was no going back to goodness anymore. I thought to myself, no, I'm going to experiment once more. So this time, I set my sights on making him exclaim, "Absolutely sensational." And once again, I distinctly heard him uttering the two words, "Absolutely sensational." At that point, a voice inside me chimed in, saying, "Why hold back? Whether you're praising yourself or not, aim for nothing but the best." After all, I realized that I was the one orchestrating the entire process. He was simply echoing my intentions. So, without hesitation, I boldly proclaimed, "Absolutely sensational." I completed the script, brought it to him, and eagerly awaited his response. To my surprise and dismay, he simply pronounced it as good. I was taken aback, almost feeling as though I might tumble out of my chair. It wasn't the outcome I had envisioned, and I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. His comment echoed in my mind. You know how authors hate ad-libbing in the theatrical realm? This term is laden with meaning. It refers to the situation when an author writes a play and an actor, in a fit of overconfidence, believes they know better than the author. They start changing the script on the fly, ad-libbing lines, or perhaps even forget their lines and try to improvise. Yet no matter how clever the actor may think they are, it never flatters the author. The author, after all, believes they understand better than anyone precisely what should be uttered in that very moment. As mentioned in his letter, he wrote, "You know how authors hate ad-libbing?" So, following that thought, when the script needed some trimming, he entrusted me with a portion to cut. I took this section home and meticulously performed the edits, all the while carrying somewhat petulant disposition. I didn't even bother revising his words. I sent it back exactly as he had penned it. However, what transpired the very next day was nothing short of astonishing. He rang me up and, with great enthusiasm, declared over the wire, "It's absolutely sensational. Now here's the crucial point that demands your keen attention." He shared my experience with the producer left me deeply perturbed. Initially, hearing or occasionally contemplating the idea that all that we perceive, though it may appear external, actually resides within our imagination, of which this mortal world is but a mere reflection. That wasn't so troubling, but when this concept seeped into my consciousness, took root and sank deeper, that's when things became truly unsettling. It was the realization that this concept is undeniably true, that the very producer who plays such a pivotal role in the creation of this remarkable series and is investing vast sums, he has the resources, Spain, and the wisdom to manage it. Had to actually verbalize the words that this writer was penning for him. He continued, "When I first met him, he was astonishingly reserved, almost incapable of expressing any superlatives. He couldn't bring himself to praise anything beyond the word good. However, over time, he evolved from good to great, just great, terrific, and finally, absolutely sensational. This transformation is nothing short of remarkable, especially considering his initial reserves. When this particular writer looks back at what he accomplished with that man, he reflects, you know, it really troubled me. It troubled me because I had to transform my external world only insofar as I could transform myself internally. The challenge was monumental. After all, it involved not just remaking myself, but also reshaping the entire world as I knew it. However, I eventually arrived at a solution. Instead of fixating on who I might become years down the line, I adopted a different approach. I decided to paint a portrait of myself, recognizing that portraits aren't created in a single brushstroke. So, I decided to take it step by step. I began with the smaller elements in my life, those seemingly inconsequential details, and I altered them to align with the image I was painting of myself. I embarked on my journey of transformation with something seemingly small, a cat. We used to have a cat, and it had a peculiar habit of shredding our rugs to bits. All the rugs in our home were reduced to tatters. In response, we postponed buying new rugs, hoping that the cat, now 15 years old, would eventually pass away. Strangely, she seemed determined to outlive even Methuselah himself. However, because she remained healthy and showed no signs of departing, we finally decided to purchase new rugs. But almost immediately, she resumed her destructive behavior, tearing apart the freshly acquired rug. This went on for 2 days, and I knew something had to change. In my imagination, I gave myself permission to intervene, seeking the approval of the producer within me. I began working on a mental image, envisioning the cat in our backyard, meticulously clawing at a designated mat we had placed there for that very purpose. Miraculously, on the 3rd day, the cat ventured out into the backyard and began clawing at the mat we had positioned there. Astonishingly, from that day forward, he never once tore up any of our other rugs. It was the transformative power of the imagination preserved within the realm of human consciousness. If someone were to hear this tale and remain skeptical, they might dismiss it, thinking, "Oh, that was merely a coincidence in his case. It won't work in my situation." But there's no point in trying. Such skepticism teeters on the edge of irrationality, and nobody wishes to be labeled as insane. In fact, admitting that you were once institutionalized is akin to confessing to a dreaded illness. It carries a stigma. People are accepting of going to a hospital for a physical ailment, such as an operation, as it's a common occurrence. However, not everyone is comfortable discussing their past struggles with mental health, which can be viewed as a more delicate and nuanced issue. In his own case, he demonstrated potential. Yet, for the average person, the idea that they too could shape the behavior of their pets, be it a dog, a cat, or a bird, in alignment with their imaginal acts, might seem far-fetched, but he did it, and now he carries the undeniable proof that the power resides within him. He doesn't intend to flaunt this newfound ability recklessly. He recognizes its reality and intends to honor it. He has discovered Christ within himself, and he anticipates the day when he will stand in the presence of infinite love. Before that moment arrives, in the presence of infinite love, one must first recognize it as infinite might. Throughout the Bible, one can find ample evidence of this, a theme consistently depicting sheer might and authority from start to finish. When Christ presents himself, it's an assertion of pure power. However, as time unfolds, humanity will come to realize that this power, both on this level and countless others beneath it, ultimately converges into infinite love. This man is a testament to the journey we all embark upon, moving closer to the divine being within us, which is none other than God the Father. Thus, in his personal experience, the profound truth emerges. The mightiest power in the world, indeed the only true power, is none other than our own wondrous human imagination. Now, let me share the story of Jan, the lady from earlier. Jan recounted that one day, her young son came home from school, and strong winds had toppled and flattened the TV. It lay on the ground, unusable. When they attempted to watch TV, they found there was no signal at all. Jan tried repeatedly, but the screen remained blank, The little boy, disappointed because he wanted to watch TV, after coming home from school and noticing the flattened aerial, decided to take matters into his own hand. He simply placed both of his hands on top of the TV set. Jan, trying to temper his expectations, told him, there's likely not going to be a picture. The TV won't work. The little boy, undeterred, it will work. I'll make it work with my imagination. He believed wholeheartedly that the power within his hands, a product of his imagination. The little boy returned to the TV, stood in front of it with Jan, and miraculously, a beautiful picture appeared on the screen. Jan, well versed in this principle, couldn't replicate the fetus self because she was an adult. As we grow up in this world, we often become adulterated, losing the unbridled faith of a child. The little boy, however, had no doubt that the power in his hands was indeed a product of his imagination. He'll do it, he asserted confidently. To John's astonishment, the picture appeared. But the boy simply looked at it without any surprise, bewildering those who witnessed this remarkable display of faith. Now let's return to the story of the gentleman and his desire to go to Egypt. He came across an advertisement for a Swiss record changer, and his interest was piqued. So he visited a local electronics dealer and inquired about purchasing one. The dealer informed him that the changers were not currently available in the country, and that it might take a few weeks before they arrived. However, the dealer mentioned that they already had 11 orders from customers who were interested in the product, and he asked the gentleman if he'd like to place an order as well. The gentleman agreed and placed an order for the record changer. At the end of the month, he received a bill for $375 for the record changer he had ordered. However, he hadn't yet received the actual instruments. Perplexed by the situation, he decided to call the office to inquire about the delay. The person on the other end of the line offered an apology and explained that there had been a mix-up, as a staff member had mistakenly treated his order as a sale. Then the person said, "We have some unfortunate news for you." As it turned out, the record changer wouldn't be available for delivery for another 3 or 4 months. The mistake regarding the bill had been rectified. It wasn't a bill, but an order that had been misinterpreted. With this information in mind, the gentleman decided to use the time wisely. Instead of focusing on his writing, he dedicated 3 days to carefully inspecting his house and determining the ideal location for the outlet needed for the record changer. After making this decision, he promptly contacted electricians and instructed them to bore a hole through the wall to accommodate the cable required for the changer's installation. The next consideration for the gentleman was acquiring a suitable stand for the record changer. He embarked on a quest, visiting various places in search of the perfect stand. During his search, he encountered a store where the shopkeeper advised him not to disclose the type of machine he had, stating that they didn't carry stands for such devices. However, the gentleman decided to reveal the nature of the machine anyway. To his surprise, the shopkeeper responded, "If you have one, it's a miracle because there aren't any in the country, and they won't be here for 3 or 4 months." This statement only confirmed what he had previously been told by the agency. Undeterred by the unavailability of stands, he resolved to take matters into his own hand. He decided to design a stand himself, a task he undertook with enthusiasm. After creating the design, he had the stand manufactured according to his specifications. When the record changer finally arrived, the gentleman was prepared. He carefully placed it in the spot he had chosen and intended for it to be. As he stood there observing the machine in its designated place, he thought to himself, "Now I will see the machine there." And so he did. With the record changer now in his possession, he felt it was only fair to settle the bill for the purchase. He took a seat, wrote out a check for the full amount of $370, and promptly sent it off to the electronic firm to complete the payment for his machine. 2 days later, the electronic firm contacted the gentleman to inform him that they had his record changer. It puzzled him as to why there had been 12 on the list when he had only received 4 in his initial shipment of an order for 12. The friend who had written the letter contemplated whether it was because he had sent his payment in advance. Having paid for what he could envision in his imagination, he didn't dwell on this question and remained grateful that he had the machine. Now faced with the task of operating this delicate, complex, and somewhat tricky device, the gentleman turned his attention to imagining himself becoming proficient at using it. Thus, he concluded his story, emphasizing the power of utilizing we must comprehend by faith. The world was structured through the Word of God, and now you know who God is, don't you? It's your very own wonderful I Am, that is God. He is crafting his desires, but the essential element here is faith. Without faith, it won't come to fruition. But when you combine hearing with faith, that's when it works. You don't have to follow the same process as he did when he said, I lay on the bed. You could be sitting right here carrying on this internal dialogue from the standpoint of fulfilled desires, because your thoughts are guided by the tracks laid down in your own inner conversation. You have control over the content of these conversations, ensuring that they aren't arguments, but rather based on fulfilled wishes. Regardless of the nature of your wish, you can nurture it inside you. Some individuals are better at visualizing, seeing vivid mental images. Others are more attuned to hearing, like myself. I find hearing to be remarkably effortless, even though I'm not musically inclined. I have an appreciation for music, but I'm not proficient in it. Yet I can vividly hear it. When a person speaks, I don't just hear their voice for a second. I capture the tone, and then I can layer any content I desire onto that tone, and it's as if I am hearing it just as they would. Now, as for how long it takes for what I've heard him say to manifest, I can't provide a precise answer. As we learn from the story in the book of Habakkuk, the vision has its own appointed hour. It ripens. It will flower. If it be long, then wait, for it is sure and will not be late. Just as different seeds have varying growth periods, some sprouting overnight, others taking a month, and yet others a year, so does the time between conception and realization vary for different desires in our lives. In the realm of birth, a human child arrives in approximately 9 months, whereas a chicken hatches in just 21 days. So it's clear that everything operates on its own unique timetable, from conception to manifestation. Within this world, what determines the nature of that interval? I don't possess the answer to that question. However, what I can emphasize is the importance of having faith that the appointed time for realization is certain and will not be delayed, not for its own sake, nor for nature's sake. Consider this. When a child is born in 9 months, it is not late for a child. And when a chicken hatches in 21 days, it is not late or early for a chicken. The interval of time between conception and manifestation is specific to the nature of the event. Whether it's human birth or the hatching of a chicken, it follows its own natural course, neither delayed nor rushed, in perfect alignment with its purpose and design. So here in our case, apply this principle, and in the next few months, you'll have the most incredible stories to share. You might start from a position where you seem to be at a disadvantage, meeting a conservative individual who would never be inclined toward wild and imaginative ideas. It's a stark contrast to his usual demeanor. He might typically settle for good and feel content with the $2,500 he's earning for a script, or the increased rate of $3,000 for a script every 3 weeks, since it's a half-hour show that airs weekly. However, now he's receiving $3,500 per script. Despite his non-explosive nature, you manage to make him explode with excitement, gradually raising him from good to great, then to just great, terrific, and finally, to the peak of enthusiasm. He mentioned in his letter that this transformation has strengthened and warmed their friendship. So, I encourage you to do the same in your own life. It doesn't matter what you desire in this world. Understand what you want, create a mental scene that implies the fulfillment of your dream, and then engage in inner conversations that align with the assumption that your desire has already been realized. This method can work wonders in manifesting your desires and transforming your reality. If you can combine visualization with auditory imagination, like having a TV set in your mind, that's even better. However, not everyone can easily visualize, but even if you can't, working with auditory imagination is quite simple. But when you do start to visualize, it's a thrilling experience, being able to see things vividly, as if in a dream while you're fully awake, is like a dream come true. When you return from that inner state, where you've already witnessed your desire fulfilled, you have no doubts or fear. You know it's done because you saw it and heard it so clearly. Now, when you meet someone who is struggling and asks for your assistance, create a mental scene where they tell you that they have already received what they sought, as if it's already theirs. Then release it. Don't take any physical actions to make it happen. Don't pick up the phone to call someone, hoping for their intervention. Just let it be. Trust that it will manifest in its own time. Just have faith in the reality of your imaginal act. Once you've gone to the end and experienced it vividly, you can let go of any concerns about the means to bring it about, as those means won't deny the end you've already reached. You've moved past conception into birth, and you've seen and heard it so clearly. Now leave it be and let it work. I assure you, it will work. And then you will discover God as you approach the final stretch. Leaving behind this world and age, you'll experience a series of mystical, mind-boggling encounters. You will personally go through everything that was said about Jesus Christ, his supernatural birth, his discovery of the fatherhood of God, and his ascension into heaven. All of it will happen to you, and you'll understand the profound truth of these stories. I invite you to test this greatest of all mysteries. Start with something simple. Even a challenging problem, like dealing with a troublesome animal, like the cat mentioned earlier, can be resolved within a short time frame, as evidenced by the story I shared. The key point to understand is that the man's response, when he exclaimed, "Terrific," perfectly matched the writer's imaginal act. The world is like an infinite echo, and it responds in kind. In this case, when the man enthusiastically said "Terrific," it was a direct reflection of the writer's powerful imaginal state. It wasn't a casual, "Oh, I think it's terrific." Instead, he exploded with the word "terrific" to match the emotional intensity of the writer's imaginal act, creating a harmonious resonance between the inner and outer worlds. To truly harness the power of your imagination, approach it like a skilled actor, just as an actor must fully immerse themselves in a role. You must immerse yourself in your imaginal act. The actor puts their entire being into the character they're portraying. And it's only when they fully identify with that character that they can transcend the boundaries of the stage. In this case, the writer became the character who was hearing the actor deliver the line. The actor was given a specific line to say. "You said terrific." And the writer directed him precisely on how to say it. It wasn't just about saying terrific. It was about delivering it with the exact emotional tone and intensity that matched the writer's imaginal act and the words he had used. This alignment between the inner vision and the outer expression is what brings your imaginal acts to life. This situation is quite fascinating because it involves a unique twist on everyday language, akin to the phrase "he threw me a curveball," which means something unexpected happened. In this case, it wasn't what the writer had initially expected. The producer previously pronounced a script good, but the writer wanted him to pronounce the new script as great. Just great, even though he hadn't even started working on it yet. What's particularly intriguing is how the producer seemed to anticipate the writer's request, almost as if he had time traveled back and applied the new label to the old script. Then, when the writer took it a step further and changed the label to terrific, it revealed the incredible capacity of imagination to shape and influence reality. However, if you're not willing to believe in the power within you and instead continue to believe in a personal God outside of yourself or a personal Savior apart from you, then you may remain stuck in your current state. But I encourage each one of you to genuinely believe in this concept and give it a try. If I've shaken your belief in an external, separate God or Savior, I don't apologize because I know what I'm telling you is true. I'm not just speculating. I'm speaking from my own personal experiences. So when I take this step forward and tell you that I've experienced the reality of God, I wouldn't care what the entire world thinks or says about it. If they ask, did you truly stand before God or have God stand before you, looking into the face of man, I would confidently reply, yes, I did. And that God is the essence of man, the spirit within, which takes on the perfect form of man to express itself in this world. When you understand that I'm as the true form, that form is man, it's similar to the story of the little girl who excitedly told her grandmother, last night in my dream, I went up to the sun, and you know what? He has a face, hands, and feet. The ocean, the vast ocean, talked to the sun, and the sun came down to earth. He has legs, and he can walk. He walked right over to me and kissed me on the cheek, and it was hot. Isn't that a silly dream, Grandma? But it's not silly at all, it's true. There is nothing but God, and God is in the form of man. So when William Blake was asked, when you see the sun, do you see a big blazing ball? He replied, no, I see a host of angels crying. Holy, holy. He portrayed God as man, because there is nothing but man. As man and God are one, and God is in the form of man. I encourage you to take what I've shared with you tonight, take it home, and put it into practice. It doesn't cost you anything, but some effort and the time you spend doing it. However, remember this, when you do it, believe in it with all your heart, just as the words, the world was spoken to them, was spoken to us. But it didn't profit them because they lacked faith, and this applies to those who heard it as well. So when you embark on this practice tonight, do it with the understanding that it, in itself, is a creative act, that imaginal act. Be faithful to it. Understand that faith doesn't give substance to the unseen reality. Instead, faith is your loyalty to that unseen reality. You've made a pledge, and now you're being loyal to that unseen reality. Now let's address some questions. The 3 tests we've discussed are drawn from quotes in the book of Deuteronomy. In this world, the only devil you'll encounter are the facts of life and the doubts of man. If you could personify doubt and allow it a voice, it would bombard you with all the facts of life that contradict your dream. Your dream, however, was already a reality before taking a concrete form. Doubt will say to you, what if you believe you can achieve all these things? Throw yourself down, for he has given the angels the power to lift you up.